look at 4 key factors to property valuation. Number 1 is location. Of course, you hear real estate professionals say location, location, location. Is it key? Yes, it is key also to private and hard money lending, right? You want to assess the neighborhood, right? You want to see if it's a quality neighborhood. You want to also verify the address. You'd be amazed as to how many times addresses, I don't want to say it's intentional, but sometimes people transpose numbers or transpose street, and you might be thinking you're in one neighborhood and you're actually not. You can actually do this from a Google check, right? But you also want to know that this location has the values that you need that's going to sustain your loan, right? And so we also want to make sure that 35% for us is a 35% protective equity is legit, right? That we're not overbuying or we're not overpaying for that location. You also want to confirm the size of the property, right? That's important because when you establish a value, we do price per square foot or dollars per square foot. You want to understand the number of bedrooms and number of baths, right? Because when this property is repositioned on the market, if they're doing a resale, this property is repositioned on the market, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, right? Also, it helps too with your evaluation. When you go to compare those properties, you want to make sure you're comparing 1,900 square foot property to another 1,900 square foot property that has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. The current condition is also essential, right? We want to know what the current condition is of the property, right? You want to make sure that the as-is value is accurate, because in the event that you extend the loan, you don't want to reposition the property to where you have more cash than the current as-is condition, right? That's very important if you're considering doing advanced payments or advanced draws. I wouldn't recommend it, but knowing the current condition is because you don't want to overextend yourself based on the condition of the loan. So basically, if you got like $20,000 out there on this particular property and the current condition is 10, then you're $10,000 in the hole, right? LKQ, this is a real estate, this is an actual insurance term, right? Like, kind, and quality. We want to make sure that when we're doing a comparable, we're doing like, kind, and quality, right? And what I mean by like is like we want to get it as close as possible. It's not always feasible, but you want to make sure if the house is raised, then we want to compare it to other raised houses in that neighborhood, right? If the house is brick, we want to compare it to other brick houses in that neighborhood. We want to make sure that the finishes are similar as well. So like if you get a house that has Formica countertops, and then we're trying to compare it to a house that has a more standard way of materials such as granite tops and stuff like that, we want to pay attention to those things when we're going through the photos and we're comparing the property that you're going to lend on to the property that's already been sold on the market. Now look, we have access to MLS because I'm also a licensed real estate agent. That is very, very important. But I don't expect everyone to have access to MLS, and that's okay. If you do not have access, you're going to have to rely on a trusted real estate agent, right? In this case, I recommend at least 2 agents, and here's why. Ask them to comp the property. If they both come in with the same numbers, then that's where you start. That's where you're going to use their numbers to come up with your how much you're going to lend, like that 65% or that 70% of that particular value. If the numbers are different, but they're not that far off from each other, then go with the smaller number. Private money lending is about shifting risk to the borrower. You're going to hear me say that throughout the course. We are in a place where we want to shift risks, right? So we don't want to, again, overextend our capital. Lending money is already risky, right? So we don't want to put that in any more of a riskier position as possible. And so therefore we want to place our capital in a safer position. Ultimately, you will need to know your lending area quite well, independent of those real estate professionals. I mean, you need to really understand that area. I'm not saying that you cannot rely on local experts. It's just for me, I like to stick to the areas I know very well. And I like to be able to put my hands on properties, right? So they have to be within driving distance for us. That's another one of our criteria that I didn't talk about on the last slide, but that's something that's kind of like a pet peeve for us. This is my way of being a good, responsible steward over our capital. And so listen, look, I'm not saying you cannot develop a sound process for lending out of your state, right? So if you want to lend outside of your state or outside of your area, by all means do it, but just make sure you have a great process in place for understanding the values in that particular area. Also, another key thing is the days on market. I forgot to mention it. We want to make sure we're paying attention to that, right? Because for us, we're in short-term loans, right? If you're doing longer-term loans, days on market might not be as important to you, but it is to us, right? Because now we want to make sure that the borrower is realistic in his exit strategy, especially if it's for resale, of getting in and out of their property as quickly as possible. So when starting out, I do think it is important that you develop a process and that you're doing loans where you live, right? I think starting off that's very important. If not, you can come across a lot of mistakes in lending in areas outside of where you live and you don't understand. Basically, if you don't understand it. And so what that can do is that can pose a lot of challenges. It can increase the cost for you and your borrower. So for instance, if you're outside of your area, you might need to get an appraisal report. At Vertical Capital, we don't do appraisals because, again, we're comfortable with our area. I have access to MLS, so I can pull the same comps that an appraisal can be. And so that us not having that expense helps out with the borrower coming to having a lot of cash out of pocket. So that's another competitive advantage, is if you can be competitive, I want you to make money, but if you can decrease some costs for the borrower, that can be very, very helpful. So getting back to the comps, right? So when you are consulting with a real estate agent, you're looking for two types of comps. You're looking for the as is value and or the current condition, and you're looking for the after repair value. Now the as is value pretty much should take care of itself. It's just to help making sure that you're not over lending on the purchase side of this particular transaction, right? But again, if your ARV is solid and you loan 65% or 70% of that value, then of course that should not even happen as far as you being able to over lend on the purchase. But again, just in case it does happen, you want to go ahead and make sure that you're not over lending on the purchase side. So let me give you an example of where that might happen, right? So say for instance, the ARV is 100,000, 65% is 65,000, right? So that means Vertical Capital will extend a loan only for 65,000, up to 65,000. That's it. Let's say the purchase price is 45,000. Write these numbers down, guys. I hope you're following me. Let's say the purchase is 45,000 per the borrower, and the renovation is 35,000. Whenever the purchase is higher than the rehab, this is kind of like a red flag to me, right? I raised my eyebrow a little bit. The numbers, in my opinion, are flip-flop, meaning they should be paying less for the property and taking the higher number to improve the property. I mean, that's what we're in business. That's what they're in business for, right? Is improving properties. This just makes sense if you are improving properties to me. Okay, But in this example, 45 plus 35, they total $90,000. Since we loan 100% of the construction, that means we're going to extend the loan on the construction for $35,000, and that's going to be held in an escrow account. And the remaining $30,000, because we only said we do 65, right? So the remaining $30,000 will go towards the purchase. In this case, remember when I said up to 80%? In this case, the borrower is coming to the table with $15,000 just for the purchase of the property. Plus, they got to come up with the additional cost for closing the property. So most investors do 70%. Even if you apply the 70% rule, they would only be, they still would have to come to the property with like $10,000. So I'll put the calculations down below so you can kind of take a look at that and kind of review and understand exactly what I was talking about when I said the max of $65,000 in this particular example that we use. You always can adjust the number later if the borrower. So another thing too, look, don't get caught up on the numbers, right? So say for instance, you agreed to 65,000, but then some additional information comes about and now your loan may be a little bit lower, right? Or if you're using an appraisal, right? And the appraisal comes in, the numbers come in different, they're just completely ugly, right? You don't have to worry about committing, right? Because you're going to use some language in your conditional offer that's going to say, hey, it's not a commitment to lend at that particular price, but at the same time, that gives you the option or the leeway to adjust your numbers accordingly as you should. Again, we're not out here trying to overextend ourselves on loans and be irresponsible. The cost of the appraisal is typically passed off to the borrower, so that should be something that they come out of pocket directly to the appraiser, right? You should definitely order the appraisal. Most lenders do order the appraisal because you want to be able to trust that appraisal person or that professional that you choose. For us, again, like I said, we don't use appraisals because I am 100% sure about my numbers. And we want to keep borrower out-of-pocket costs low. This helps us to be competitive.